explain the relationship between variance and standard deviation? Can either of these two measures be negative? So, variance is the square of standard deviation, or standard deviation is the square root of variance. So this one says that standard deviation is the positive square root of the variance. And both standard deviation and variance can never be negative. In fact, even range can also never be negative. So none of the measures of dispersion that we learn can ever be negative. And given the data set, how do we know whether to calculate sigma or S? So sigma is for population standard deviation and S is for sample standard deviation. So let's go through the choices. If the given set of data contains a large number of entries, then S is calculated, and that has nothing to do with whether you calculate S or sigma. Same with B. And then C says, when given a data set, one would have to determine if it represents population or sample. If the data is population, then sigma is calculated, and if it's sample, then S is calculated. That's correct. Find the range, mean, variance, and standard deviation. So we can use Statcrunch to find all of these. Let's do Statcrunch. So click this little window and open it in Statcrunch. And so if you have to find mean, median, variance, or standard deviation, you can use, after copying the data, you can do stat, summary stats, and columns. And then you select the column, and you see here a lot of things are selected by default. So mean, variance, standard deviation, these are selected by default. And here you want it for the sample data. So as far as range or mean is concerned, it doesn't matter whether it's sample or population. So we will hit the compute button. And we can see here the range is 15. And X bar is for sample mean, but whether it's the sample mean or population mean, Statcrunch just calls it mean. So to the nearest 10th means 1 decimal place, so 11.8. And S square stands for sample variance. So in Statcrunch, variance is actually sample variance. So if you ever are required to calculate population variance, then I will let you know how to do it. So right now, we just have to remember that when Statcrunch just says variance, that is actually sample variance, so 32.4. And S is for sample standard deviation. So once again, sample standard deviation is just called standard deviation by Statcrunch. So to the nearest 10th, it would be 5.7. Well, this is similar, sample variance and standard deviation. We can skip it. And now they ask for population variance and standard deviation. So once again, you will copy it in Statcrunch. And the command is stats, summary stats, columns. And now population variance and standard deviation are not selected by default. And so you will go in this main list, which has everything. And now Statcrunch does not call it population variance, it calls it unadjusted variance. So unadjusted variance means population variance. So compute. Okay, we did not select the column. So now unadjusted. Okay, so it's 144. And for population variance, the symbol is sigma square. So sigma square is 144. And similarly, now we want the population standard deviation, and for it, the symbol is sigma. And Statcrunch calls it unadjusted standard deviation. So you can do options, add it to go to the main screen. And now we need the population standard deviation, which according to Statcrunch is the unadjusted standard deviation. So we select it from here and compute. And that's 12. And here they want the range, sample variance, sample standard deviation. We know how to do this. We can skip. Same here. Okay. Now here they are saying over the last 10 years, 4 mutual funds have the same rate of return, 12%, and they have different standard deviations. So first has 8%, then the co-joint has 6%, together has 4%, and all for one has 9%. Which is most consistent? So the one that is most consistent is the one that has the lowest standard deviation, because standard deviation measures how much you are dispersed, and a higher standard deviation means more dispersion and therefore less consistency. So most consistency means the lowest standard deviation, which is for the together fund, which is 4%. So lowest standard deviation, which means it's the most consistent. Okay, so here we have to calculate the sample variance. So we know how to do it in Statcrunch as learned in the previous problem. Similarly, we know everything here. The only addition is that now we also have minimum and maximum, which you can easily see. The lowest value is the minimum and the highest value is the maximum. And the sample size is how many values there are. So let's just do it. Open in Statcrunch. And stats, summary stat, columns. Select the column and compute. So right now, even you can see the maximum and minimum are here. Minimum is 27, maximum is 88, but in this part, they're asking the sample size. The sample size is the small n, which is 15. And then the mean is 56.133. Now they're asking to 3 decimal places. Variance, they are asking for sample. So we have the word sample here. So they're asking for the sample variance, which we know is the default variance in Statcrunch. So this variance is the sample variance to 3 decimal places to 78.695. Sample standard deviation is 16.694. Median is also present in the summary stats, 54. Okay, range is also present there, 61. Minimum is 27 and maximum is 88. Okay, sigma square we know stands for population variance. What can be said about a set of data with a standard deviation of 0? So standard deviation of 0 happens only when all values are the same. In this case, the variance is also 0. Now, although B is also not wrong, it says when all observations are 0, okay, in this case also the standard deviation and variance will be 0, but the point is that all observations don't have to be 0. They just have to be the same, whether they are 0 or some other same value, and then that will make sure that the standard deviation and variance are 0. Okay, if the variance is 100, standard deviation is what? So standard deviation is the square root of variance. The square root of 100 is 10. If the standard deviation is 2, what's variance? So variance is the square of standard deviation. So 2 square is 4. Okay, S square stands for sample variance. Identify as true or false. Standard deviation can be negative. No, neither standard deviation or variance can ever be negative.